Yeah. Okay, so okay, so we'll start the class now. So you're able to perform that docking, right? Okay. So now we're going to talk about the intricate details of this particular docking software and all. Before I proceed, one thing is that why are you unable to join the class at 8 a.m. in the morning?
Sir, there is a problem in the morning in the house.
Huh?
For 8:30 I can join, but for
Okay.
8 there is problem.
Okay, 8:30 is fine. Do you have problem getting up early in the morning?
No, that is not the problem.
Okay, fine. Okay, so then we can actually continue some classes in 8:30 also. Okay. Okay, so let me start it. Okay. So the thing is that we performed the Autodock. We have used Autodock Lina for the docking purpose. So you already know that what's docking. But before I begin, I'm going to ask you and discuss that in detail about the background of this particular docking. Okay. So at first, this particular method was actually developed in 1982, as you can see from this particular method, and it was actually developed just to start the structure-based drug designing part. Now, why structure-based drug designing part? Because earlier in the days, what happened? Generally, the drugs that were discovered, it were either discovered in fluke or it didn't have any detailed structural features. Why? Because some of the people know that they actually used to use the active molecules, the bioactive molecules, either deciphered from the plant. They could be alkaloid. For example, you know that urosolic acid is actually used in several of the is actually used as an anticoagulant for your cough and cold. Now urosolic acid is actually found. So how was urosolic acid discovered? So it was found that the tulsi, we know that tulsi is actually one of the leaf that can actually provide us ailment when we have cough and cold. So later on, it was the NMR and other method they discovered that tulsi actually contains some active ingredients, and among them urosolic acid is actually the one and the main component which can provide you the immunity from this common cough and cold viruses. Okay, and why? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Screen was not shared. Sorry. Just a minute. Yeah. You want to say it right? Okay, fine. So now you see that urosolic acid, later on they found out that among the tulsi leaf there are many chemical compounds, but the most active ingredient was actually the urosolic acid that actually provides you that relief from that cough and cold. So now what they happened, now there are several medicines in the market. They are either the Decol Total and all the other drugs. Now what they did was they modified the particular urosolic acid structure to make it more potent, and that's how different brands of drugs, different types of common cough and cold drugs came in the market. But later on people found out that this drug, but they don't know how come this particular urosolic acid is so active, how can it prevent the common cough and cold. That was the thing that actually hindered. So what they deduced is that these are the molecules, they ought to bind with some proteins, and if these active ingredients are binding with the proteins, we ought to have the structure of these proteins in detail. They're studying the structure in detail. Okay, so later on they found out that to discover and discuss in detail the molecular mechanism of how this particular chemical compound is providing this active relief, you have to go to the detailed structural studies. Now, while we are performing the structural studies, it was really impossible to see later, before this virtual screening and the computer-based screening came on. It was really difficult to assume and find out the complex structure of this particular molecule with the protein, right? So what they did, they discovered this particular tool to visualize how the molecule is interacting with the particular proteins. Okay, because if it is happening in real life in inside the cell, that is not known. People were unable to say it because the molecule is really small and it's really difficult to deduce with which protein is it binding. But then came the chromatography technique, and people now then they knew that if that particular molecule is binding with a molecule, then obviously the size is increasing, and we can detect that particular increase in size with the help of the DLS. Okay, and with this method, they told that, and they can deduce that yes, this particular molecule is interacting with this particular protein or not. That thing can be deduced. But the main intricacy is that how is it binding? What are the residue is it binding to? What are the common forces that it is using to bind on to the latching onto that particular protein? For that, molecule docking came into this particular scenario. But at the very beginning, people only had the goal of docking this ligand with the protein. But later on, they deduced and they found out that this particular docking can actually be used as with protein to study the protein structural detail, the protein nucleic acid, the ligand nucleic acid, all of this thing. And now the thing is that why now once we came to know the sudden rush of deducing the structure of proteins where it was boosted, because for docking you require the structure of protein. So people then actually this particular docking also helped the structural biologist, as many people started deducing the structure of proteins, and that particular thing, the structural biology part, was lingering a little bit before this docking scenario came into being. Okay. And but the main funda is that since people came to know that these drugs are actually working and binding with the protein, the virtual screening concept came into being. And in this particular concept, what you do is you use a whole library of molecules to select the one ligand that is binding with your protein. Now, can you name a few virtual libraries of ligand? Yes. Can you name a few ligand library of the ligand? Abhinandan? Yes. The Zinc database is one of the databases that you can actually use to find out the ligand. And not only that, you also have the PubChem library as well, right? As soon as you get to know about this ligand libraries, now we are now finding out that how come or which ligand is actually binding to the particular protein from the library. Why? Because we don't need that particular ligand to work. If we can find out a suitable lead molecule, we can use that lead molecule, we can optimize that lead molecule to deduce and develop any ligand of our choice. That's what the chemist come into being. The chemist can actually understand and find out the networking in that particular ligand structure with which it is binding, and they can actually optimize that particular thing. And for that, especially the medicinal chemist, their job is actually to optimize a ligand such that particular ligand might show high intensity binding with a particular structure. Now the thing is that while you are using this particular docking, this docking is actually a mimicking of the real life scenario. Because what is happening? Because there are two main things that we should see. The proteins generally, they stay. What is the condition, the general condition or the environment in which proteins are present? What is the general environment in which proteins are present? The chemical environment, the optimum pH in which the proteins are active. 7.4 is the optimum pH. Yes, but the thing is that it actually varies. It depends on the cellular context. If that particular protein is present in the cytosol of the organs like heart, kidney and all, then the optimum pH is obviously 7.4 and all. But if that particular protein is present in your stomach, then the optimum pH might vary, right? So according to the pH of your surrounding, the protein structure varies, because the protein doesn't have a single structure. They actually have multiple structure. Why multiple structure? Because the protein can change their structure according to the chemical environment. So if somehow your pH level changes, and you know that in case of cancer, when a particular person suffers from cancer, then the general pH of that particular cytosol becomes acidic. So the pH actually changes, right? And with the change of the pH, the protein also changes their structure. So proteins, they have multiple conformations in which they are actually suitable. And according to that particular chemical environment, they change their conformation. So they have conformation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and such and such. But obviously, one or more of these several conformations, there is also obviously one conformation that is present in much higher threshold than the other conformers, right? But now the docking that is done, that is not done in the normal chemical environment, because docking is generally done in vacuum. It is generally done in vacuum. So the protein, the way the protein behaves in vacuum and the way the protein behaves in a particular solvent is completely different. So that is one of the key drawback of the molecular docking scenario, and that is that it is carried out in vacuum. And that is why it is always essential to perform the MD simulation after you perform the docking. After you get a docked structure, you have to perform MD simulation by mimicking the normal cellular condition, and you have to put up the normal FF14SB or the GAF force field or the FF14SB force field, because these force field are, the FF14 is the most latest force field, and they mimic the normal cellular condition. The way the proteins they change the structure, they have a particular structure parameters. It mimics that particular thing. So it is always essential to perform that MD simulation after you start up this particular docking study. Okay. Now the thing is that, so if your molecule, if you are only using a docked structure, then it is not a proper structure. Why? Because in a vacuum, the docked structure is made up of vacuum, and in your body the protein doesn't stay in vacuum. So the way the ligand is attaching or binding with a particular protein in vacuum, that is always not true in case of a solvated system. Yes, in solvated system you might see that kind of work, or you might see that kind of chemical interaction, but that's a very rare chance. Okay, and that is why that's the main drawback of docking that you have to perform to prove that if it is really binding to it. You at least have to simulate the entire structure, obviously in a solvated system, by using TIP3P water box and all, and perform the docking. Okay, so the next thing is that, so you see the setting up of the structure for docking is just as important as the docking itself, and analyzing the result of the stochastic search methods, they can sometimes be unclear. So in this field of molecular docking, docking is actually a method which predicts the preferred orientation of one molecule to a second when they are bound to each other, and obviously to form a stable complex. Because in docking you also get to know how would you know if it's a stable complex or not. Suppose you have already performed some docking. So let me ask you, as a PI, if I say that how do you know that this particular docked conformation is a highly stable conformation? But suppose you might see only a single hydrogen bond and all. Okay, suppose you are finding that there is no hydrogen bond at all. There are several, yeah, say, by seeing the interaction energy, by seeing the binding energy, the delta G value. So you have calculated and carried out the docking, right? So you must have selected only a single piece of docking from your entire list of dock servers. So how do you know it? By seeing that particular interaction, the energy interaction. That's the next thing that came into being. How do you know which pose is the better pose? Because in docking you might find that your ligand is binding to the protein with multiple poses. Now the next question comes is, what is poses? What is pose? Pose is the orientation in which the ligand is binding to that particular protein. And this knowledge of this preferred orientation, in turn, it might be used to predict the strength of association or binding affinity between two molecules. For example, by using the scoring functions. So the scoring function, whatever you do, the scoring function has to be a very stable. The scoring function has to be very good, because without a proper scoring function, you will be unable to state that which docking pose is better or which docking method is better. Why? Because you see, at the end of the day, you are having multiple orientation, you are having multiple poses, but you actually have to select the one which you think is actually happening in that particular body, be it a mouse or a human, right? And you have to go ahead with that particular thing. So for this, obviously you have to know the binding affinity. So how do you calculate the binding affinity? By this particular scoring function. So how are these scoring functions developed? So the next question is, how are these scoring functions developed? The scoring functions are developed by using several algorithms. Okay, so I'm going to discuss that how the scoring function is going to happen in detail later bit. So you see that this particular molecular docking has actually become an important and very common component of the drug discovery toolbox, right? And why? Because of its relative low cost implication and the perceived simplicity of use, and that has actually stimulated an ever increasing popularity within the academic communities. Because you see, right now you are also performing docking. Why? And because it's really easier to. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't changed the screen. Okay. Because it is much easier to do, and you only require only just a computer to perform this particular docking. That's why it is so important. So now the thing is that two things that the major. So as I've told you that you require algorithm for this docking to happen. So what is the major function of docking? There are two steps for docking. The one, to calculate and find out the poses, different poses by which the ligand is binding to your molecule, and second, to assess which pose is the better fit, to assess the binding interaction, and for that you require the scoring function. So two poses are, one is scoring function, the pose. Now this sampling algorithm, it actually predicts the many conformations, and these conformations are actually referred to as poses that the ligand can actually assume within this binding or this active pocket. And then you have the scoring function, and the scoring function then actually predicts the binding energy between the ligand and the receptor for each of these predicted pose. But there is one thing that you have to remember, that there is a inherent garbage in, garbage out defect of molecular docking that is present. Now, can you think why I am stating this particular statement, that garbage in, garbage out? What does this garbage in, garbage out terminology is related to molecular docking, and how is it a defect? So one of the defects that I have told you is that molecular docking takes place in vacuum. Okay. So what do you think is another drawback for this molecular docking? Try to think of anything. Just, you might be wrong. No, I don't care. Just try to think. Yes, right. Absolutely right. Yes. If the input is wrong, the output will be wrong. Now, which input can be wrong? What do we use as an input? Yeah, we use a ligand structure and the protein structure. So if the ligand or the protein structure is false, if the ligand and protein structure is incorrect, then obviously the output that you get, that will also be incorrect. And these garbage in garbage out policy leads to a lot of researchers to dedicate countless hours to this identification of the hit compounds, and that later proved to be inactive. Now, there are several considerations that can actually greatly improve the success and enrichment of these true bioactive hit compounds, and these are commonly overlooked at the initial stages of a molecular docking study. And this inherent flaws are further exacerbated by user oversight and error. But one thing is that there is no one rule fits all policy in molecular docking, and most docking programs, they have varying methods to deal with each of the topic that I'm going to discuss with you, and the detail of each of the detail of each of this program is actually outside the scope of this particular class, and it must also be taken into account that every receptor or protein is different, and the ability to replicate the experimental and physiological finding is highly system dependent. Because if you see that a particular molecule is binding to your protein, and if suppose you found out this particular molecule that you're using as an antibiotic is highly interacting with a particular bacterial protein and is inhibiting that bacterial protein. Suppose I'm giving you a scenario. Okay, suppose while docking you found out that there is a particular molecule that you are using as an antibiotic and it is binding with a particular protein. Suppose the RNA polymerase of that bacteria, it's binding with the RNA polymerase of the bacteria and it's inhibiting that particular its function. So obviously the bacteria is going to die, and it's showing very high important or high interaction with a particular protein. But the minute that you are using that particular ligand, so you synthesize that ligand and you are now using it on that particular bacteria. But now you are finding that particular molecule is having no effect on that bacteria. Why do you think it is happening? Or what do you think might be the reason? The docking antibiotic resistance. Yes, but that's a novel antibiotic that you are using. And if you are stating antibiotic resistance, then can you, yeah, you are on the right track, but can you narrow it down a little bit? What kind of resistance? What kind of resistance? The resistance is obviously one of the right answer, but what kind of resistance? Mutation in the structure. Suppose the structure is all right. There is no mutation in the structure. Yeah, you might be right, but yes, suppose there is no mutation on the structure. Your answer is right, obviously, but suppose there is no mutation on the structure. There is no structural changes. A very easy example. See, the first is that the molecule must be cell membrane penetrating. If the molecule is unable to penetrate the cell membrane, if it is unable to penetrate the cell coat of that particular virus or bacteria, then obviously it can't invade that bacteria, right? It can't invade that particular cell. If that molecule fails to invade the LPS membrane, then obviously it can't go inside the bacterial cytoplasm and bind to that particular protein, right? So that might be the one. Or the other is that, yes, you are right, the bacterial antibiotic resistance. But why? The presence of ATPases. The presence of ATPases. Now, what are these? These are actually there are, in a bacteria there are several receptors which bind, not receptors, these are proteins that are present in the membrane, and they are actually, what happens is that they have strong tendency to attach with some molecules, and if that particular ligand acts as a if it binds to that particular receptor, then what happens, they simply throw that particular ligand out of the bacterial cell. What is this procedure called? Even if that particular ligand is able to invade into the cytoplasm, there are several proteins that bind to the particular that bind to the particular protein and throws out that particular molecule out of the cell. What's this procedure called?
Exocytosis.
Exocytosis. And what kind of receptor causes this? Clathrin mediated, not that. Anything else? Try to find out. Don't worry, try to find out what kind of receptor causes that. Okay, and that is one of the main reason for the anti-cancer effect of a particular molecule, as well as the antibiotic resistance of a particular bacteria, because that class of protein is present in the cancer cell as well as in the bacterial cell, and all they do is simply bind to a particular drug and throw that drug out of the cancer cell, or in this particular case the bacterial cell. Okay, so now we're going to see that apart from that, what are the things that can actually induce and stop the molecular docking? What are the things that we have to keep in mind? Now, the first thing that we have to keep in mind is that apart from this docking, so one of the main things that we require is to have a proper receptor structure, proper protein structure. Now, how can the protein structure be any different? Because the protein structure that we get is obviously fine. So how do you know that the protein structure is not bad? See, first is that the receptor structure, the protein structure that we get in the particular X-ray crystallograph is not always a proper structure. Why? Because they sometimes lack the hydrogens. Although most receptor preparation tools accurately complete the process that were not undertaken during X-ray crystal structure refinement, it is actually important to understand that these process and make adjustment where necessary. For example, sometimes what happens, as I have told you, that X-ray structure, they lack hydrogens. Why? Because hydrogens are undetected in X-ray. The X-rays move through hydrogen, and since hydrogens, X-rays move through hydrogen, it is impossible to get the hydrogen. Okay, and second is the atom type charges. Now, just to give you an example, you know that as I've shown you that histidine actually provides a very unique problem in terms of this residue protonation, as it can be protonated in 3 different conformations. The imidazole ring of this histidine can actually be protonated in a neutral conformation at the epsilon nitrogen or at the delta nitrogen, or it might have a plus charge conformation where both epsilon and delta nitrogens are protonated. And to further complicate the correct conformation of the imidazole side chain ring, there are ambiguities in crystal structure that often switch the carbon and nitrogen, and that creates an additional 3 rotameric conformation, and that conformation is known as flipped conformation. Okay, so what happens that if you have the flipped conformation, then that particular protein, and if your molecule is binding with a particular carbon and nitrogen, then obviously it's not a correct conformation. You have to check that particular conformation, and it is not only with the histidine. You are going to find the same thing with aspartic acid, lysine, and all that particular thing. And why it might be protonated in different condition? Because it gets protonated according to the surrounding pH. So if you change the pH, the protonation state of the particular histidine or the particular amino acid is going to change, and change in the protonation structure changes the structure of the protein, though not in a detailed structure or in a great, it's not a great structural change, but it's a very small structural change that can hamper the protein integrity. It can block an active site, it can open an active site, because we have seen that these minute changes can actually open up or close an active site. Okay, so thing is that, so you have to, so if you are performing docking, you have to know that where is that particular protein belonging. If it is belonging to this particular organ, then what is the normal pH of that particular organ? If it is suitable, is present in the particular organ or not, and if your molecule is present in the particular organ, then it must have, according to the particular pH, that this will be the structure of protein, and you have to use that protein as your starting model. Because if you are not using that protein as a starting model, then the scenario that is happening inside the cell and the scenario that is happening in the docked screen is completely different, because remember, the ligand are binding, they only have very minimum interaction. It's not that the ligand is going to have several 10, 12, 13, 14 interaction with the protein. No, not that. Sometimes the interactions are bare minimum, or there are only one and two hydrogen bonds, and one or two hydrophobic interactions that actually keeps ligand docked to a particular structure, and that is sometimes enough for the ligand to bind to that particular conformation or bind to that particular area. But if that particular conformation changes the structure, then obviously that wouldn't be enough to keep the structure bonded to that particular position, and that might change the entire thing. Okay, now the second thing is that, so you always have to prepare the protein structure. You have to keep in mind that your molecule is having perfect, there is no side chain missing, there are no missing bonds and molecule chain breaks. Because understand that in X-ray structures, wherever they find that these particular things are not there, they don't care to incorporate those in the structure, otherwise that will be a malicious structure. Secondly, in case of NMR, so in case of NMR, they only provide structure for small domain. It is impossible to predict the structure of a very large protein using NMR, because it's providing or getting the structure in NMR is a really complex procedure. Manually you have to predict and assign the peaks, and there will be hundreds and thousands of peaks, and that's really difficult to assign. Okay, that's why generally the NMR structure, they have a part of protein, and that's also poses a problem, because if that particular your ligand is not binding to that particular part of protein, then you will be unable to use that particular protein as your standing structure, right? The second thing is that as I've told you, that most important is to predict the accurate pose of that solved crystal structure, because as I've told you, sometimes protein have multiple structure. So suppose you have crystallized a protein and you have solved the structure of that protein, but how are you sure that the crystal structure that you have solved is the accurate conformation? The original conformation might be, as I've told you, protein have multiple conformations, and among multiple conformation there is only a single conformation that is highly stable, or that is mostly stable at its present in your system. But you have failed and you have calculated the structure of a different conformation of that particular protein, and how do you know that that is the correct conformation or not? So it is always better to see different structure of a same molecule predicted by different people. And once you see that yes, your structure predicted by the different scientists are all correct and all, then you might take any one of the structure from there. But if there are some ambiguities, then you should address that ambiguity, and you should never dock a ligand to a structure or to the area which has ambiguous nature embedded on that particular area, because if that particular structure is or if that part of the structure is ambiguous, then you should not use that particular part as your docking site. Okay, now the next thing is that, suppose in docking generally what happens is that you are using a particular ligand to bind to a particular protein, and suppose it is binding to that particular protein and it was very highly with a high efficiency. But if that algorithm is itself wrong, how do you know? Because if the algorithm is wrong, then it is going to use the proper ligand. Suppose you have two ligands. One is a very good ligand that is actually showing an interest, and second you have a ligand that is not binding to a protein. But suppose the algorithm is not at par. The algorithm that you are using is not highly beneficial. Then obviously it is going to create a problem. Because if the algorithm couldn't predict, or if the algorithm is falsified, then it is going to say that yes, both the ligand are binding to your protein with same efficiency, and even the ligand which should not bind to your protein, it might be showing that the algorithm might be predicting that yes, it is binding to your protein. So selection of the proper algorithm and differentiating the decoys from the active is highly important. So how are you going to select the differentiate or the decoys from actives? Do you know what is decoy and what is active? Do you know what are decoys? See, decoys are the molecules that are not intended to bind to the target receptor. They are topologically distinct from the active inhibitors, okay, and thereby they serve as a suitable negative control. And this decoy is actually a highly useful benchmarking strategy and metric to gauge the success of this molecular docking program. And the major success is that it must have the ability to differentiate a true active from the decoy. And true active are the molecule that actually has the propensity to dock or bind to your structure. Now the decoys are the molecules that have same cheminformatic property like molecular weight, log P, number of rotatable bonds, number of hydrogen bond donor, acceptor, all these things, okay. And as these decoys are not intended to bind to this target receptor, they are topologically distinct from this active inhibitors, right? And the enrichment of this docking program can actually be assessed by the ability to rank true actives above decoy ligands. So before you perform a docking, you should always develop a decoy. How to develop a decoy? Simple. You have to have a ligand, then simply use the same cheminformatic property like molecular weight, log P, rotatable bonds and other features, and use them to develop a ligand that is structurally similar to your molecule, but it is topologically different, but they have same cheminformatic property. But that ligand should not bind to your protein. But even after development of the particular decoy, you are seeing that yes, your ligand or your docking program is allowing both the decoy and the active to bind to your target protein. Then you know that the algorithm of that particular program or the docking program is wrong. And if the algorithm is wrong, it is suitable, it's advised to not use that particular program, okay. And that is one of the things that you should keep in mind. And the next thing that we should keep in mind is that side chain flexibility. So what is side chain flexibility? As you can see that we know that the particular protein, they have side chains, right? They have an amino acid and the amino acid have the side chains. And the side chains are the thing that are actually protruding outside. Now obviously the amino acid that are present, there are two kinds of amino acid. The amino acids that are present on the surface of the protein and the amino acids that are present in the inside of the particular protein, that is present in the hydrophobic amino acids, okay. Now those amino acids that are present inside the particular protein, they don't have side chains protruding outside, whereas the surface amino acid, they have the side chains that are protruding outside. And generally the ligand, they exploit these side chains to dock to a particular protein. But the problem is that if that particular side chain is highly flexible, that might create a problem. Why? Because if it is highly flexible, then what's going to happen? You are docking a ligand to a flexible side chain, then at this moment the side chain will be present at x1, y1, z1 coordinate. The next millisecond, the side chain is going to change the structure to x2, y2, z2 coordinate. Again, the next second is going to change to x3, y3, z2, x4, y4, z1. That might be the coordinate of the particular side chain. And if the side chain flutters so much, do you think it is going to maintain a stable interaction with the ligand? No. At this minute you are finding there is a bond. The next minute you are seeing there is no bond between the ligand and the particular side chain. The next minute again you are seeing a bond. Then again the next minute the bond breaks. So there is bond formation of bond and breaking of the bond. And that is going to throw the ligand out of the protein surface. So it is always better to have the ligand or your ligand to bind to the or dock to a particular protein which have very, or not bind to the protein, but bind to the amino acid that have very low side chain flexibility. Generally, this is the list of the side chain flexibility. The most flexible molecules are lysine and arginine. So suppose your ligand is binding to the lysine or arginine side chain. Now, obviously, when they're making an interaction, and if it's not a hydrogen bond, it's only a hydrophobic interaction, then what's going to happen? And we know the hydrophobic interaction, the hydrogen bond is one of the most weakest interaction. So obviously, it's not hard to break that particular bond. So obviously, it is shifting out. It's going to break the bond. Rather, if you are bonding or if you are predicting that your ligand is binding to the phenylalanine side chain, then since they don't have high flexibility, it is going to maintain the proper structure, and that is going to keep the ligand interacted with that or bonded to that particular phenylalanine side chain. So it is always advised to use the side chain with minimum or the amino acid with minimum side chain flexibility. But it's, as I've told you, all receptors are unique. So it is not always possible to develop a ligand that is going to bind only with histidine or phenylalanine or tryptophan. Sometimes your active site might contain lysine and arginine or glutamine or methionine. At that particular period, you have to develop a ligand to interact with this kind of molecules, right? And you have to develop it, and that's one of the issue that you are going to. So it's not a hard and fast rule that you should not. But generally, if you have an option to dock anywhere else, then you can give it a try. But if your active site or the ligand binding site is a single, then obviously you have no other option. Is this part clear? Okay. Okay, now the next thing is that, as I've told you, that the ligand, when it is binding to a particular protein, it is not only using the hydrogen bonding interaction. There are various elements of binding free energy, including you have long range electrostatics, desolvation energy, you have the entropic contribution, and these kind of things are actually poorly defined in the conventional scoring function that are utilized in molecular docking. So to address them, MMPBSA and MMGBSA have been brought into picture. So what is MMPBSA? MMPBSA is molecular mechanics, Poisson-Boltzmann surface area, and MMGBSA is molecular mechanics, generalized bone surface area. So these two programs, they use the inherent Gibbs free energy, and not only that, it uses both the polar and non-polar solvation terms, the entropy term, as well as the long range, short range electrostatics, the desolvation energy, everything to give you a proper information about their binding intensity. For example, you see, generally the formula that it follows is delta G binding equal to delta G of complex. So first it determines the binding free energy of the complex molecule, receptor ligand complex. Then it also tries to develop and find out the binding free energy of the receptor alone and the Gibbs free energy of the ligand. And then it simply, if you follow this simple formula, then it is binding to this particular or unique, you're going to get the delta G value. And always remember, in our biology, Gibbs free energy is the one thing that is governing every interaction. All the interactions are actually governed by Gibbs free energy. Why? Because Gibbs free energy encompasses not only the polar contacts but also the hydrophobic contacts as well. And that gives you a proper measure of the binding affinity. So it's always advisable to use the docking program that uses MMPBS and MMGBSA as the scoring function, because if you don't use it, now obviously since it is able to since it is using all these things, it takes some time. So obviously the algorithm that uses MMPBS and MMGBSA, they take a little bit more time to process than the one that do not use these things. Okay, clear? Okay. Now the thing is that there is also one more thing that you should keep in mind, that is the active site water molecule. Now do you know what is active site water molecule?
Water molecules that are perfect in the catalytic site area.
Very good. But do you have any idea why they are present there or why you have named them as such?
They help with the interaction of the ligand.
Yes. How do they help?
Bind bond, the hydrogen bond.
But if your ligand is forming hydrogen bond with a water molecule, it is not binding with the receptor. That's with water molecule, right?
Yes.
And if the water molecule goes away from the active site, then the ligand might also get carried out away from the active site, right? So this active site water molecules are actually the key determinant in ligand receptor binding, because not only can they mediate hydrogen bonding between ligand and receptor, but their contribution to entropic and enthalpic changes are also significant. And in a virtual screening context, the addition of this water, and water is generally an explicit solvent, right? It is frequently neglected because it is a it requires intensive computation simulation, and it does not permit the rapid screening that is required for large libraries that is often seen in the high throughput virtual screening. And that is why accounting for these active site water molecules or water molecules in the docking, it remains a significant challenge. And one of the main thing is that suppose you see that you have one, while you are developing a ligand molecule, you are obviously going to take into consideration the volume of the active site, right? If the volume of the active site is suppose 3 angstrom cube or 10 angstrom cube, then obviously you can't develop a ligand that has more surface area than the active site water active site, right? Because that molecule or the ligand must fit into the active site. So you have downloaded a structure that does not contain anything in that particular active site, and they have developed a ligand according to the structure of the active site. Okay, and you have developed a complementary ligand according to the complementary to the active site of that particular protein. And while you are developing and simulating, you are finding that yes, the ligand is not entering the active site. Why? Because there are already water molecules present in the active site, and that is bound to reduce the volume or the surface area of that active site. Because if there are 2 or 3 or 4 more water molecules present inside the active site, it is going to prevent the accommodation of that particular ligand molecule, and the ligand molecule is going to fail to enter the active site because the volume of the active site has now reduced. Right? So for that you have to keep those things in mind. And the second thing is that suppose you have seen that in the active site there are lysine and arginine residue that are present, and you want your ligand to bind to that lysine residue. That's the most important interaction that you must have. You have developed an inhibitor, but the active site water molecule is already forming a hydrogen bond with the lysine residue. So even if your ligand is entering the active site, it is unable to bond to that particular lysine because the active site water molecule is already forming a hydrogen bond with that lysine residue. In that particular case, the affinity that you have desired or the affinity that you have thought of, that is not going to match, and it would be a very low affinity interaction. That would not be a stable complex. That would hinder the formation of a stable complex. So if there are any active site water molecules, you always have to look for different entity. And if your active site water molecule is binding or forming a hydrogen bond with any other residue, then you have to look for other residues for your inhibitor to go and bind to, not to that particular residue with which the water is interacting. So these are 2 things that you have to keep in mind. Clear? And the most important thing is that, see, if you might be able to develop a ligand, because you must always prevent the interaction of your ligand with the active site water molecule. Because if your ligand forms a hydrogen bond with the active site water molecule, that would be a waste of interaction, because then that particular point is not available for the protein to bind to, right? So that is why selection of this particular active site water molecule is also highly important, and not all water molecules that are present in the active site are active site water molecules. Only the water molecules that keeps on bonded to the active sites are the active site water molecules. Because remember, in the active site there are a lot of water molecules that goes inside the active site and they also moves out. because that is a site and it is reachable by water. So obviously there would be water molecule that is going inside that particular thing and coming out. But only a few would be there that is going to stay there for a long period of time. And you should identify those water molecules only that are present in the active site for a long period of time. Clear? And so you see that one of the most important consideration to make when commencing this structure based drug designing study is the question of project design, especially if the user is a beginning in the field. The more prior knowledge and availability of the published data, then the greater the chance of success in the project becomes, where the proper scrutiny of available literature is actually essential. Because you see that at the end of the day you have to have a proper structure, okay, and the structure, if that particular structure mimics with your system protein, the more it mimics with the system protein, the more better your structure or more better your docking would be. But obviously it is always essential to perform the MD simulation after you dock a ligand to your particular protein. It is always advised to perform MD simulation, okay. And obviously for formation of this you must perform the MD simulation in presence of an explicit solvent method model, okay. Typically tip 3P, if you are using amber, then tip 3P4 water molecule, or if you are using charm and or this other, then according to that. And if you are using Schrodinger, the one thing for Schrodinger is that Schrodinger don't have a water system that is suitable for nucleic acids, okay. They have water systems suitable for protein study, but they don't have the water system suitable for nucleic acid. So that is one thing that you should always keep in mind. If you are having a nucleic acid as a docking structure, then it's better advised not to use Schrodinger. It's better to use the AMBER program for simulation. Okay. Clear? Okay. So these are the things that we should keep in mind before we submit a structure to the particular PDB for docking studies. And if you can keep all these things in mind, then the information that you gather from the docking study would be highly significant. And this information they rarely would be challenged by an authority when you go for publication and all. Okay. So we are stopping here today. Okay. Then I'm going to send you the schedule of the next class. Possibly, probably this particular your next class would be on. I would take it on Thursday. So not Thursday, sorry, on Friday, and hopefully in Friday if I take it at 8:30, you don't have any problem. So I would notify you beforehand. Okay. Clear?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So that would be all for today. So thank you, Abhinandan, for joining. Please. Yeah. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. is actually a little bit difficult for me to start.
Okay.
Okay. Would it be possible for you to join at 8:30? 8:30 would be a good time to join. I don't know if I'm going to send you the schedule. It's not that I have made up the mind to take that class on that particular day. But if it is possible for you, then I can try to make up a schedule like that.
Okay.
Okay. So I will let you know. I will send you the schedule.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Thank you, Abhinandan. Thank you. Bye. Bye.